So Sony has just announced its ZV-1 successor, the ZV-E10, and I'm sure you've seen YouTube has been plagued by reviews. Obviously the embargo has been lifted and there's videos everywhere. Now I was really excited about what Sony would do in terms of the ZV line, and I held off buying the ZV-1 because I was waiting for the successor. Now because I was interested in what Sony was going to release, I've watched a bunch of these videos now, but there's one thing that's kind of bugged me, and you know, I'll be honest, I'm actually really disappointed with the ZV-E10. It just feels like something went wrong. All the reviews I watched were so positive, and quite honestly, I feel like they weren't honest. Now, there were a few reviews that did pick out some of the bad features of the ZV-E10, and you know, I clocked in on those straight away. And, you know, we need to remember here that the ZV line is aimed at vloggers and content creators and people who need a camera to do, you know, basically anything. But this is where the ZV-E10 kind of missed the trick, at least in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, the ZV-E10 does add a lot of great new features, interchangeable lenses, USB-C charging, and there's a touchscreen for focus and stuff like that, and you can live stream directly from it. That's all great stuff. And I know with the ZV-1 you could still live stream, but it was a lot more complicated in terms of the process. But here's the thing, I don't think the ZV-E10 is actually worth getting, and I think you should get the ZV-1. And in this video I'll be breaking it down and why I think the ZV-1 is actually a better choice if you want a compact and easy to use camera for vlogging and content creation. So let's get straight in. So firstly, the field of view of the ZV-E10. Now obviously the field of view is customizable because we can take the lens off and put on something new. But that's a problem. The kit lens that you get with the ZV-E10 is a 16-50. And that's equivalent to a 24-70. But that's the same as the ZV-1. Now I don't know if you guys noticed, but back when the ZV-1 was released, everybody said it was too cropped in for vlogging. They said, I would have loved the ZV-1 to have a wider lens, and when the ZV-2 comes out, or whatever it's going to be called, the lens should be wider. So Sony releases a sort of fix for that by giving us interchangeable lenses, but the lens that you get as the kit is the same. So actually, we don't get an improvement there other than the fact that you can put a wider lens on. But let's just remember who the ZV series is for. These cameras are aimed at content creators who I feel personally may be new to content creation. If you're someone who already makes content, I think you're going to be looking at something better than the ZV-E10 and the ZV-1, and if you have something better already, you may be looking at these cameras as backup rather than your main go-to. For example, I use the A7 III, this is my main camera. If I was to buy the ZV-E10, I'll use it as a backup, or a B-roll camera, not as my main camera. So let's just say you get the 16-50 with the ZV-E10 and you're shooting with it, and it is a little bit cropped in, and you think to yourself, hey, maybe I want to buy a new lens. Well, then you've just increased the price of the ZV-E10 to over £1,000, maybe 1,200, depending on what lens you buy, and yet we have the ZV-1 at 699. Do you see where I'm going here? It seems good on paper having this option for interchangeable lenses, but then you're going into £1,000 plus territory. But is that how much you want to spend? How serious actually are you about content creation? And if you are serious, do you already have something better, like the A7 III or A7S III, you know, whatever? So what I'm basically getting at here is, if you buy the ZV-E10, it's likely you're going to need to get another lens other than the kit lens, and it's just going to cost you a lot more money. And if you're someone who just will use the 16-50 and you won't ever plan on buying another lens, because a lot of people do that. I know a lot of people who just buy a camera with interchangeable lenses and they stick the 18-55 kit lens on for the whole duration of the time they have the camera. But isn't that a waste? Why not just get the ZV-1? So right off the bat, I'm already questioning, who is this camera for? Is this camera for the beginner content creator who just wants an easy camera to use? Or is this for, you know, a full-time content creator, in which case they may already have something better or would buy something better than this? The next big bad thing about this camera is the rolling shutter, and nobody seems to be talking about this, and this is really bothering me because in the reviews everyone's like, hey, yeah, there's a little bit of this rolling shutter going on, and they just skim over it. It's rolling shutter, but whatever, it's not that bad. It's really bad. I've seen a lot of reviews now, and in every single one, whether or not it's in the vlog setup or whether or not it's, you know, shooting and panning across certain things, the rolling shutter is so distracting. And this is bad because if you're a vlogger and you're in a location or you're doing a travel video or something like that and you want to pan across your scene, if your scene starts to go like this because you're panning across it, that's bad. I don't think that this is good in any way for vloggers because If you're a vlogger, you want a really clean image. You're trying to show people the world. You're trying to show people what you do. So this is a big deal for me because if I wanted to use the ZV-E10 as a B cam, I'd want to be, you know, shooting various things. Likelihood is I'd have someone shooting for me and panning across. And if I'm getting a lot of rolling shutter in that, the images will basically be unusable. That's a big deal for me. So the next thing here where Sony kind of missed the trick was the active stab. So stabilization in cameras is pretty important. I have stabilization in the A7 III. It's not the best, but you know, it's good enough. I had really good stab in the GH5, so you know, I kind of know what it's like to have good stab. And what I'm seeing in all these reviews again is that this stab is bad. So not only have we got rolling shutter, but we've got really bad stabilization. And just to add insult to injury, the stabilization adds a 1.44 times crop. So not only have we got complaints from the ZV-1 about the, you know, the cropped in field of view for vlogging, well, the ZV-E10 takes it to another level. And I've not seen many reviews that have said, hey, you know, we said with the ZV-1 that it was too cropped in, but now with the ZV-E10, if you want to use your active stabilization, it's even more cropped in. No one has touched on that. And that is a big deal. If you want a wide field of view and you want to have, you know, lots of stuff in the shot, your scenery, you basically won't get that with the ZV-E10. Not only that, but the active stab adds to the jello effect, the rolling shutter. We're seeing it exaggerated even more because of this stab, which is already doing this, right? Because that's the way it stabilizes the shot. There's not built-in IBIS, it's all digital with this camera, so it's not actually getting a steady shot, it's just kind of warping it so it'll look steady. But then you've also got the jello doing this. It's so bad, and I'm really surprised less reviewers touched on this, because this would be a deal breaker for me, and I think it is, to be honest. Now, the battery, again, we have one of those smaller Sony W batteries. We don't have the nice big battery like we have in the A7 series. Is this a big deal? Well, I think, you know, if you're a content creator and you're out there shooting a lot, battery life is going to be important to you. Not only are you going to have to buy a new lens, you may also have to buy a new battery to make sure that you're not running out of juice by the end of your shoot. This camera is really pushing the live streaming feature as well, and yeah, it's great. You know, most people can just connect it to USB-C and just power it for most of the time. But what if you're not in a location where you can get power? What if your setup doesn't have a close point? Yeah, sure, you can buy a super long USB-C cable, but I can bet a lot of people will just be using the battery with this camera, and if it's just running out all the time, what good is that? I personally wouldn't have minded seeing a slightly bigger form factor in order to put a better battery in this, because at the end of the day, vloggers actually probably shoot more content than anybody. They're constantly making stuff. So if you're trying to make a product that says, hey, go make some more stuff, why would you put a battery in which is bad? Another thing which is a big deal for me is the ZV-1 had the built-in ND filters. Now this was basically like a groundbreaking thing at the time, because there weren't that many cameras out, and I still don't think there are, that have built-in ND filters at this price point. Now this was an amazing feature, so if you were in bright daylight, you just slap the ND on, you can get that really good aperture, depth of field, because you have an ND filter built into the camera. Now with the ZV-E10, we don't get ND filters anymore because it's an interchangeable lens camera. Instead, you're going to have to buy a variable ND, something you put on front of the lens, something else you have to buy. So everyone's talking about, yeah, it's great that you can, you know, use this depth of field button and get this background blur. I'm interested to see if that's increasing the shutter speed, and if it does, that faster shutter speed, and I'll just make this really simple for anybody who doesn't quite know what I'm going on about here, but if you increase the shutter speed, all those jitters and those jello and that rolling shutter will be even worse because the shutter is faster. You know, when you shoot at 24 FPS, which is the normal frame rate if you're shooting, you know, video, talking head, vlogging, whatever, you get a bit of motion blur because the shutter speed is quite slow. If you're having to shoot at 1/1000 or something like that because you're using this depth of field button, but you don't have an ND filter, then you're going to be running into some issues here, especially if the jello effect and the active stab is just all over the place and even more exaggerated because of the fast shutter speed. I wish more reviewers spoke about that. A lot of people are going to buy this camera thinking, hey, I can just stick on the, you know, the depth of field, background blur, whatever, and it's going to look great. But no, it isn't, because if you've got that fast shutter speed, your footage isn't going to look good. It's just going to look really jittery and just, yeah, trash. Who is this for? Who is this camera for? Because the ZV-1 kind of comes with everything you need. You just get the ZV-1, go out and shoot, you're done. You might need another battery, but other than that, ZV-1, good to go, no problems. But who is the ZV-E10 for? You need to buy all this extra stuff, extra lenses, ND filters, maybe another battery. I don't know. who this is for. Why not just buy an A7 III? Why not just buy the A6 600? Why not just buy an A6 400? And then we have the build quality. So the ZV-1, you know, is small, compact. It's basically a compact camera. It is a compact camera. I don't know why I'm saying that. It's cheap, it's fun, it's easy to use, and it's all in one package, and it fits inside your pocket. That's the biggest thing. It fits in your pocket. If you want to get content, bang, in your pocket, good to go. You don't need to worry about lenses. You don't need to worry about taking care of those lenses. You don't need to worry about buying lenses. It's just there. You get what you get, and that's it. But with the ZV-E10, it feels like, you know, this has interchangeable lenses. You might be putting premium lenses on this thing, but the camera just feels cheap. Now, is that a big deal? Probably not for most people. I mean, I've got the A7 III. It's built really nicely, and I can tell it's a well-made camera. I love the feel of this, and there is part of me that thinks, you know, if I bought the ZV-E10, would I just think this thing feels terrible? Probably. Because I like a nice, you know, metal construction. I really like the feel of a solidly built camera. And I understand that the ZV-1 also wasn't built that well, and there's no weather sealing or anything like that. But again, for the price and the fact that it's kind of your all-in-one and you're not expected to really add anything to it, I kind of feel like that's okay. But with the ZV-E10, because you have to put lenses on it, and you may be putting weather-sealed lenses on the ZV-E10, but if the camera's not weather sealed, you risk maybe damaging that lens, and I think that's also something nobody's spoken about. Nobody's mentioned that. You know, so if you want a small compact camera for vlogging and content creation, for me right now, it seems like the ZV-1 is actually the better choice. So what do I personally think about the ZV-E10? Well, quite honestly, I think it is a good camera. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it will be fine for most people, and it's not going to be a terrible choice if you do buy it. But bear in mind who this is actually for, and the fact that it's supposed to be a successor to the ZV-1, which was small, compact, everything built in, ND filters, really great little camera. I just think something went wrong down the line. It's like people said, hey, we want a wider lens on the ZV-1, and Sony thought, okay, I know how we can do that. We can just do interchangeable lenses. Now, my thinking is that maybe Sony thought, hey, if we make a really good camera with no interchangeable lenses, we can't sell more lenses because people will just buy one camera and just use it. I mean, if every single vlogger just used a ZV-2, shall we say, and didn't have to ever buy a lens, Sony's losing a lot of money here. So it makes sense to kind of use the interchangeable lens system to give people that flexibility, but also raise their sales when people say, actually, the 16-50 isn't good enough for me. I could do with something, you know, with an f1.8, something a bit different. So yeah, that's why I think we have interchangeable lenses. So the fact that we lose a lot of the core features of the ZV-1, the ND filters, the good stabilization, the compact size, because even though the ZV-E10 is compact, it's not going to be if you have a lens on it. You're going to have to either take that off to put it in your pocket, or you're just going to have to leave it on and get a camera bag. That's not what the ZV-1 was for. I really would have liked to have seen a ZV-2 that would have basically been exactly the same as the ZV-1, maybe just a slightly wider lens, maybe a bit of a better battery life, you know, USB-C for power and charging, and a touchscreen for focusing. That's it. That's all Sony needed to release, and that's all Sony needed to release. I think people would have liked that camera. I don't think people would have said, hey, we really wanted interchangeable lenses. People who want interchangeable lenses just buy an A7 III, or an A7S III, or an A6400, or an A6600. Who is this camera for? Seriously, just ask yourself, who is this camera really for? And I'm seeing a lot of comments on videos saying, hey, I just bought the ZV-1, I'm going to send it back and get the ZV-E10, or, you know, similar kind of things. But in my opinion, I think that's the wrong choice. If you were getting the ZV-1, you want something small, compact, something you can vlog with, something that's easy. And long term, the ZV-E10 won't offer you that. So my recommendation, do a bit more research, but for me, it's all pointing towards the ZV-1 over the ZV-E10. But I'll wait to see more reviews come out. I think in time we're going to see reviews that are a little bit more critical of the ZV-E10. Hopefully we do, because I think there's a lot of things here that people are just skimming over and glossing nicely over. Hey, there's this really bad thing, but that's fine. Because it's not. Not when you consider the audience for the ZV-E10. So guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like. It really helps out the channel. If you have any comments or questions about the ZV-E10 or the ZV-1, feel free to leave them down below and I'll get back to you. If you want to see more from me, be sure to subscribe and hit that alert button as well. It really helps out the channel and you'll be notified when I upload something new. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video.